They say corporate betrayal doesn't come as a thunderstorm. It arrives as an email marked urgent at 9:02 a.m. on a Monday. For me, it started with footsteps, fast ones, down the hallway, followed by the unmistakable sound of chaos pretending to be authority. The door to my office slammed open so hard my coffee trembled. Standing there was Stephen, my boss's son, face red, veins pulsing like he'd just run a marathon of ego. And behind him, like a disappointed shadow, was his father, Mr. Langford. The man who'd built Langford Dynamics from a small family-run software firm into a mid-tier empire of automation tools. "She's been meeting with our competitors," Stephen barked, finger stabbing the air like he was conducting an orchestra of lies. "You can't trust her." "Fire her." The room fell into silence thick enough to choke on. Mr. Langford's eyes flicked from his son to me, searching for truth or perhaps just the path of least resistance. The man was tired. Corporate tired. The kind of exhaustion that makes people believe whatever keeps the machine running. I didn't say a word. Didn't deny it. Didn't defend myself. Just looked at Stephen. Calm. Silent. Because sometimes silence cuts deeper than words. You could almost hear him squirm under it. "I saw her, Dad," he insisted, voice cracking like a kid denied dessert. "Last Thursday, lunch meeting at the Harbor Cafe with that guy from Ion Systems, the competitor who underbid us on the Phoenix project. He thought he had me, thought he'd finally found the silver bullet to remove the woman who refused to laugh at his jokes or clean up his messes. He didn't know the man I met wasn't from Ion Systems. He was from Ashcroft and Reiner, intellectual property law firm, the kind that eats corporate thieves for breakfast." Mr. Langford sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Stephen, maybe we should—" But Stephen cut him off. "No, Dad. She's a traitor. You told me yourself loyalty is everything I wanted to laugh. Loyalty. Coming from the guy who once tried to sell our internal code to a client off the record for a consulting bonus. I'd saved his job that day. Quietly. Covered the breach before the board found out. He never thanked me. Just bragged later about fixing the problem. Now here he was, pounding my desk, demanding my head. Mr. Langford didn't look at me when he spoke. "Miranda, let's talk in my office." The rest of the morning blurred. People avoided my eyes. Slack went quiet. The same colleagues who once begged for my help on deadlines suddenly remembered invisible tasks that required urgent attention. That's the thing about corporate loyalty. It evaporates faster than coffee in a boardroom. By the time Mr. Langford called me in, I already knew what was coming. "Miranda," he began softly, like he was reading from a manual on empathy. "This isn't easy. You've been with us, what, 8 years?" 10, I corrected gently. 10. Right, 10. "You've been instrumental to our success. But with these allegations and the perception of impropriety?" There it was. Perception. The corporate guillotine that doesn't need proof. Just optics. "We have to let you go." I nodded. Calm, professional. Too calm for his liking, maybe. "I understand," I said. He blinked, surprised. "You do?" "Of course. You have to protect the company." He nodded awkwardly, relieved that the storm he expected never came. He didn't realize the storm had already passed, and I was the one who'd built the lightning. I packed my things slowly. My mug, my folders, the framed quote on my desk that read, "Integrity is doing the right thing when no one's watching." Irony's favorite decoration. As I walked out, Stephen was standing by the elevators, arms crossed, smirk plastered across his face like a participation trophy. "No hard feelings, right?" he said. I smiled. "None at all." He didn't catch the spark in my eyes, didn't recognize the look of someone who'd stopped playing defense. Because while they thought I was meeting competitors, I'd been documenting every piece of my work. Every line of code, every system, every diagram I'd built for Langford Dynamics over the last decade. And I had discovered something far more interesting than gossip. The company's flagship tool, the one they were preparing to license globally, still ran on a framework I had designed entirely. one I had never signed over ownership for. When I left that building, cardboard box in hand, I didn't feel fired. I felt free. Free to act, free to claim what was mine, free to stop being the silent architect behind someone else's empire. They thought they were cutting out a liability. What they really did was set loose the one person who knew where every wire connected and how to pull them without leaving fingerprints. They'd learn soon enough, because the next knock on their door wouldn't be from a competitor. It would be from the lawyers I'd just had lunch with, and the envelope they'd open wouldn't be a pink slip. It would be a cease and desist with my name stamped on every page. You'd think that losing your job after 10 years would hurt. But walking out of Langford Dynamics that afternoon felt strangely peaceful, like unclenching a fist I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. Outside, the air had that sharp post-rain clarity. I stood on the curb with my little cardboard box and watched people rush past, clutching laptops, coffees, and stress like they were medals. 10 years of building, debugging, firefighting, gone with one meeting. And I didn't even flinch, because I knew something they didn't. That week before everything fell apart, I had already started making copies. Not of company secrets, but of my work. The framework I'd created before Langford Dynamics even hired me. My original code base, my architecture, my automation logic. The same system they later rebranded and built their success on. I still had the earliest versions, timestamps, Slack messages, and email threads proving I'd brought it in as pre-existing intellectual property. That was what I'd been discussing at the Harbor Cafe. Not poaching offers. Protection. I'd seen it coming months earlier. The whispers about fresh leadership. The subtle push to replace older staff with younger, cheaper faces. I'd survived the last 3 restructurings, but this time the warning signs weren't subtle. Stephen had started shadowing meetings I used to lead. He'd ask questions he didn't understand, and then repeat my answers word for word to his father as if they were his own ideas. At first, I ignored it. You tell yourself it's temporary, that competence always wins. But competence without visibility is camouflage. And I'd been invisible too long. So when Stephen accused me, I didn't fight. Because fighting would have been playing on his field. I'd already moved the game somewhere else. The next morning after my firing, I sat at my kitchen table, coffee steaming beside my laptop. My inbox had already flooded overnight, some coworkers pretending to be shocked, others asking what really happened. I didn't reply to any of them. The company line had spread faster than truth ever could. Miranda was meeting with competitors. Miranda leaked something. Miranda went rogue. Let them talk. Rumors are temporary. Receipts are forever. I opened the folder labeled Langford_framework_ pre-2020. Inside were hundreds of files, scripts, flow diagrams, and prototype screenshots. Some had my initials embedded in the metadata. Others had Slack timestamps from years ago, back when I was still naive enough to think merit mattered. By noon, I was on a call with my contact at Ashcroft and Reiner, a woman named Dana, sharp as a scalpel and twice as dangerous. So they fired you, she said, sipping something unseen on the other end of the line. Convenient timing. Less than a week after I asked about IP ownership in writing, I replied. She laughed softly. Then they just made our job easier. Dana explained the process, filing provisional patents for my core frameworks, confirming authorship, building a timeline that proved what existed before my employment contract. I had the logs, the original GitHub entries, even early emails between me and a freelance UX designer from back when the system was just an idea in my apartment. Everything was lined up like dominoes. That afternoon, I went back to Langford Dynamics one last time to collect my last paycheck and sign the offboarding forms. HR greeted me with that brittle politeness they reserve for people who might sue later. Good luck, Miranda, said Karen from HR, smiling too tightly. You've been such an asset. Asset. Like I was a spreadsheet line item. I handed over my badge, signed the paperwork, and walked out without looking back. But as I passed the glass hallway, I saw Stephen in his father's office through the tinted pane, pacing, waving his arms, clearly proud of himself. He'd probably already told everyone he'd protected the company. It was almost poetic. The man who accused me of betrayal had no idea the company's flagship product, the one he bragged about to investors, still carried my command syntax, my libraries, my fingerprints. 2 days later, I got a message from one of the junior developers, Hannah. "Miranda, just curious. Did you ever sign over the core framework ownership?" "Steven's been saying you did." I smiled at the screen. "No," I thought. I didn't. Out loud, I only typed, "Be careful what you repeat, Hannah. Some things aren't what they seem." That evening, Dana called again. "All documentation verified," she said. "We'll file provisional patents first thing tomorrow. You'll be listed as the sole creator." I stared at my monitor. The green glow reflected in my coffee. For the first time in months, I exhaled without bitterness. The next steps would take time. Legal filings, review periods, letters. But the foundation was solid. Everything they'd built rested on what I had created. And soon the law would recognize that officially. It wasn't revenge yet. Not the loud kind, anyway. But it was the kind that starts quiet. The type that builds pressure behind closed doors until something eventually cracks. Langford Dynamics thought they'd silenced me. But in reality, I'd just started speaking a new language. The one written in legal codes and ownership rights. I didn't need to shout. All I had to do was wait. Because soon enough, the silence around me would grow louder than any accusation. And when the paperwork arrived on Mr. Langford's desk, with my name printed across the top, even Stephen would finally understand. You can't fire the person who built the floor you're standing on. It's funny how fast a reputation can unravel when people smell weakness. By the end of my first week unemployed, I'd gone from the backbone of Langford Dynamics to the woman who sold trade secrets. That's how corporate storytelling works. Accuracy optional, drama mandatory. The first rumor I heard came from Hannah, the junior developer who'd messaged me before. She texted late at night, a screenshot of the company's Slack channel. "Steven says you were consulting for Ion Systems for months." I stared at the message for a while before replying. Of course he does. I didn't ask her to correct it. I didn't care. Because while Steven was busy playing defense in public, I was quietly preparing my offense. Dana and her team at Ashcroft and Reiner worked fast. 3 provisional patents were officially filed under my name within 5 days. One for the adaptive framework architecture, one for the predictive automation layer, and one for the data synchronization interface. All 3 matched the skeleton of Langford Dynamics' main product, CoreLink. And the best part? I had timestamps proving my versions existed 2 years before the company ever branded theirs. Still, I didn't celebrate. I just waited. Because legal progress feels glacial until it suddenly feels nuclear. Meanwhile, the whispers spread. Friends from other departments reached out, carefully choosing sides while pretending they weren't. "We miss you here," one message said. But the timing looked bad. Translation: "We believe the gossip more than your track record." It stung. More than I wanted to admit. I'd spent a decade mentoring some of them, covering for their mistakes, staying late to fix code they'd broken. And now I was radioactive. I learned quickly that corporate loyalty is a handshake with a timer. Still, I stayed quiet. Quiet people make loud moves later. That Friday, I was eating leftovers in my kitchen when the phone rang. It was Mr. Langford himself. "Miranda," he said, his voice sounding older than I remembered. "Look, this isn't an easy call." I imagine not. He sighed. "Steven's young. Impulsive. Maybe he overreacted. But I've been hearing some concerning things. Legal chatter. Something about intellectual property filings." Ah. So word had started leaking. "I wouldn't know," I said evenly. "You know how rumors spread." He hesitated. "You didn't take any company material, did you?" "I took what was mine," I said. A pause. You could almost hear him doing the math, weighing ego against exposure. "We'd like to resolve this quietly," he finally said. "No need for unnecessary drama." Quietly. There it was again. The word people use when they mean cheaply. "I'm sure you would," I replied. But we're past that stage. He tried to keep his tone calm, but his voice trembled. Miranda, you need to understand, this could damage everyone. Clients, staff. It already did, I said. The day your son accused me without proof. Silence. Long, awkward, thick. Then he said, I'll have legal reach out. You do that, I said, and hung up. 2 days later, Dana forwarded me a letter, a polite threat from Langford's attorneys. They called my patents unsubstantiated and warned that pursuing them could constitute defamation and theft of proprietary assets. I read it twice, then laughed. They were bluffing, and badly. Their proprietary assets were my source code. Dana called me soon after. They're nervous, she said. We'll draft our formal response and attach your documentation trail. It'll shut them down fast, but I didn't want to shut them down. Not yet. I wanted them to sweat, to feel that subtle shift in the air, the kind that comes before a storm breaks. Meanwhile, Stephen kept feeding the rumor mill. He'd started posting on LinkedIn, vague, self-congratulatory nonsense about integrity and leadership and protecting innovation from internal sabotage. The comments were filled with clapping emojis and corporate cheerleaders. I didn't reply. I just took screenshots. Then something unexpected happened. Hannah called me, voice shaking, whispering like she was confessing a crime. Miranda, you need to know, the code audit showed something. The new build? It still has your original framework buried inside it, the one Stephen swore they rewrote. I closed my eyes. There it was. Confirmation. The company's flagship product was literally built on my protected IP. Every license, every client deployment was now a potential liability. You didn't tell them, did you? I asked. She hesitated. Not yet. But they're panicking. I think they know good, I said softly. Let them. That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights off, watching the city flicker below. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt like gravity had quietly shifted. No explosions, no shouting, just inevitability. I opened my laptop, drafted a new email to Dana. Proceed with full filing. Include the audit findings. Notify the board? Then I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time before adding one last line. They fired the wrong person. When I hit send, I didn't feel vindictive, just steady. I'd spent years being the quiet one, the fixer, the invisible support beam holding up someone else's empire. Now, I was the fault line. And the tremors were only beginning. By the second week, Langford Dynamics was unraveling faster than a bad code deployment. It started with whispers from former colleagues, messages arriving at odd hours, hesitant, laced with curiosity and fear. Miranda, did you really file patents? Stephen's been losing it in meetings. Legal is doing some kind of emergency audit. People are freaking out. I didn't respond to most of them. Not because I didn't care, but because I'd already said everything I needed to say. With documents, not words. Ashcroft and Reiner had sent the official cease and desist notice 3 days earlier. It was addressed to the CEO, copied to the board, and written in the kind of language that makes executives sweat through their tailored suits. Each section listed a specific module, library, or process derived directly from my work, complete with creation timestamps and version histories. Dana called me that morning. They'll either fold, she said, or they'll fight. But if they fight, they lose harder. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Then let them pick. She chuckled. You're calmer than most clients in your position. I had 10 years to practice. By noon, I started hearing things. A manager I used to work with, Rick, called from his personal phone. They shut down internal access to CoreLink, he whispered. Whole dev team's locked out. Something about pending IP verification. Stephen's pacing the hallways like a caged animal. It was surreal, knowing the storm I'd set in motion was finally landing. Later that day, Hannah texted again. Stephen's blaming everyone. He called an emergency meeting and said someone must have leaked to you. I smiled. He's not entirely wrong, I typed back, then deleted it. Instead, I just sent, stay quiet. Watch everything. That night, I barely slept. It wasn't anxiety. It was adrenaline. I'd spent years staying late at that office, watching men with less talent and more confidence climb past me. I'd fixed their crashes, rewritten their errors, and made their systems shine while they took bows. And now, for once, the system itself was glitching, exactly where it should. The next morning, my phone buzzed before sunrise. It was Dana again. "You might want to check the news," she said. There it was. Tech Today exclusive. Langford Dynamics faces IP dispute over core automation framework. The article was cautious but clear. An unnamed former engineer had filed patents that overlapped with the company's core infrastructure. They quoted an anonymous source saying, "The company may have unknowingly deployed unlicensed technology." Unknowingly. That word made me laugh out loud. Within hours, LinkedIn lit up. Investors went quiet. Employees stopped posting inspirational quotes. The silence was deafening and beautiful. By mid-morning, Mr. Langford called again. This time his voice was shaking. "Miranda, we need to talk." "I believe you're supposed to go through my attorney," I said. "I'm asking as someone who's known you for years," he pleaded. "You're a good person. This can't be how you want it to end." "End?" I said quietly. "No, Mr. Langford. This is how it starts." He exhaled heavily. "You've made your point." "No," I said. "I made my work. You just took the credit." There was a long silence, then, softly, "My son made a mistake." I almost felt sorry for him then, not because of the company, but because he still didn't understand. It wasn't just Steven. It was everyone who'd watched it happen and said nothing. Everyone who'd laughed it off when my work disappeared under someone else's name. The reckoning wasn't personal. It was systemic. By the end of that day, Langford Dynamics froze all public client updates. Their support portal went offline for maintenance. The industry blog started speculating about licensing issues, potential legal exposure, and investor withdrawals. And while chaos brewed on their side, my life became strangely simple. Mornings were quiet again. No endless Slack threads, no late-night urgent fixes for other people's blunders. Just me, a cup of coffee, and the steady hum of justice catching up. Still, I wasn't naive. Companies like Langford didn't crumble overnight. They patched holes, spun narratives, found scapegoats. And I knew exactly who they'd turn to next. Steven. Sure enough, a few days later, Rick called again. "You didn't hear this from me," he said, "but the board's having an emergency meeting. They're demanding proof Steven led the development. Legal found metadata tying everything back to your original commits. I could picture it. Steven sitting there, red-faced, fumbling excuses while the board dissected every lie he'd told. "What happens now?" I asked. "They're trying to control the damage. The investors are threatening to pull out unless they resolve the IP issue within the week." I thanked him and hung up. Then I poured myself another coffee, opened my window, and let the breeze in. For years, I'd been told that humility was a virtue, that staying quiet made me a team player. But humility in the wrong room just paints a target on your back. Now, as I watched the company that dismissed me drown in its own negligence, I realized something important. I didn't need revenge. I just needed recognition. And the truth had already started to speak for itself. Langford Dynamics was learning the hardest corporate lesson of all. You can't build an empire on stolen ground. And tomorrow, they'd learn what it costs to try. The morning the settlement email arrived, I was halfway through washing dishes. My laptop chimed from the other room, a single, sharp sound that cut through the silence. I dried my hands, opened the screen, and there it was. Subject line, Resolution Agreement, Langford Dynamics. For a second, I just stared at it. 10 years of late nights, ignored contributions, stolen credit, and quiet endurance all distilled into one email. My heartbeat slowed. This was it. Inside was the official letter from their attorneys, every word perfectly polished, every sentence dripping with corporate diplomacy. Langford Dynamics acknowledges that portions of the CoreLink framework originated from intellectual property developed solely by Ms. Miranda Holt prior to her employment. There it was. Acknowledgement. On record. In recognition of this, Langford Dynamics will license said technology under Miranda Holt Consulting LLC, with annual royalties and full creator attribution. Both parties agree to a mutual non-disparagement clause. I laughed quietly. They wanted silence in exchange for respect. For me, that was a bargain I could live with. Dana called 10 minutes later. "Congratulations," she said. "They caved faster than I expected." "Fear's a good motivator," I replied. "You did this right, Miranda." No drama, no social media explosions, just precision. That's how systems collapse, I said. Quietly. It wasn't victory champagne that night. Just tea, a clean inbox, and a calm I hadn't felt in years. The kind of calm that comes after finishing something enormous. Something right. But while I had closure, the news kept moving. The industry blogs ran with the story again. The headline read, "Langford Dynamics settles IP dispute after internal audit confirms authorship." They used my initials, not my full name, but everyone who mattered knew. Stephen, of course, disappeared from the company site within 48 hours. His LinkedIn went private. A week later, he posted a vague update. Taking time to reflect and explore new opportunities. I didn't bother to check the comments. Mr. Langford reached out once more, this time by email. "Miranda, I know things ended badly. I want you to know I never meant for it to go this far. I wish you the best." I typed a reply, then deleted it. Some apologies don't need responses. Instead, I focused on the future. Dana had suggested I formalize my consulting business, and within a month, Holt Systems Consulting, LLC was born. My first clients? Two mid-sized tech firms who'd quietly severed their contracts with Langford Dynamics after the scandal. They wanted stability and trust. When I walked into my new workspace for the first time, just a small rented office downtown, bright with morning light, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Ownership. Every desk, every line of code, every decision was mine. I hired Hannah first. She hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to leave the safety of a big company, but she came anyway. "I don't want safety anymore," she said. "I want honesty." I handed her a laptop and smiled. "Then you're in the right place." Within weeks, the office came alive. The sound of keys tapping, coffee brewing, quiet laughter, all without the toxicity, the posturing, the politics. Just work that mattered. Sometimes, though, the past echoes. A few months later, I ran into one of my old colleagues, Rick, at a tech conference. He looked sheepish when he saw me. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Back then, I didn't say anything. I should have," I nodded. "We all make choices." Some louder than others, he hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, everyone's saying you handled it with class. The board still uses your case as an example during compliance meetings." That made me laugh. Glad I could be educational. After he left, I found a quiet corner and watched people passing by, most of them younger versions of who I used to be. Ambitious, hopeful, maybe a little naive. And I thought about the lesson I'd learned too late. Loyalty without respect is servitude. Langford Dynamics would survive, probably even thrive again. The world forgets fast, but their code, their foundation, their success, all of it now carried a small digital signature. My name, etched deep in its architecture, invisible to the untrained eye but always there. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd tried to erase me from their system, and now they'd spend years paying me every time they used it. One evening, I stayed late at the office. The lights dimmed as the city outside flickered into night. Hannah had gone home hours ago, and the quiet hum of the servers filled the room. I opened an old file on my computer. The first version of the framework I'd ever written. back when it was just an idea and a dream. At the bottom of the code, in a comment line, my younger self had written, "Build something that outlives you." I smiled, because I had. And it had taken betrayal, loss, and a false accusation to finally make me realize it. As I shut down my laptop, I thought about Stephen's words that day. "She's been meeting with our competitors, fire her." He was half right. I wasn't meeting competitors, I was meeting lawyers. And now I didn't just have my job back, I had my name back, my future. And every time Langford Dynamics powered up their systems, they'd be reminded the woman they fired was the one who made them run.